and send some loving energy his way too. His knee has been bothering him for several weeks, and Dr. John he's a chiropractor, but he also does some other modalities, and so he's working to help Michael improve his knee, and so send energy that way, and he is still not on with us. So if you have a question or comment, you can press 1, and I'll go ahead and turn you on, and we can start talking. I will start, I'm getting ready to click it. I did not do Podbean last week because I didn't take my microphone, my big podcast microphone with me, but I will be uploading some of the MP3s to Podbean if that's where you listen to the show. And Michael has joined us now. So Michael, I told them that we already have Sean working on the YouTube conversion of the special shows from Blog Talk, and we've already got 6 or 7 of those up on YouTube as of this morning. So, and if
that's awesome. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah. And if anybody else would be willing to help us with that, we do have 5,000 shows out there, so Sean can't do it on his own. And so we'd appreciate support in that direction. I also mentioned that if they watch any of the shorts or any of the YouTubes, to like them and subscribe to the channel, that helps their ratings as well. And I told them I would let you give the update. Yeah. I told them I'd let you give the update on what's happening down there in Sarasota.
Cool. Well, one of the other things I will start doing when I get back home is we'll start doing more shorts. Just going through this codependence workshop, and the why is this happening to me again. It's actually nice to be back in the saddle. It's been, 5 years since I did the last public series of workshops aside from the intensive in 2019. I did Birmingham in 2019, so I guess that's more like 4 years, 5 years. Anyway, nice to be back in front of a live audience and rocking it. The energy was just so right on, and for me, it's like this just seems to be the ever-opening lotus flower, this understanding. I got several new pieces of my own puzzle this weekend, and just really sweet and pretty awesome to watch people get it. I actually just got a text about 10 minutes ago. Some of you might remember Natalie DeLong, who's been to Heartland and been involved in work for a while, and so she brought 3 ladies with her this past weekend for the whole weekend. And the text I got from her this morning was, everybody's doing worksheets on the Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness app this morning, me included. So, Jeannie, your work is being really put forward. So everybody was really excited. We're at an event center. By the way, if you have worked with any of Dr. John's products in the past, if you've ever ordered them, you can order. He put out for our folks a 20% off coupon. You can look on the website. Actually, he's kind of changed around the way he's doing business now with his supplements, and he's just doing all kinds of really unique things. And you can take a look at his website. It's mitozen.com. And you can, if you look through and you decide you want to buy any of his products, you can call. You can't do it online, but you can call and order the products and give them the code FORGIVE, and they'll give you 20% off. And or he's shifting things over into a club. So he's got a new website, mitozen.club, and it costs $10 to join, which for lifetime, which is nothing. And you get access to all of the events that they've done here at the center, including our workshops. So then, and you can order the products there as well, or at least look at them if you decide to join the club, which I just did. And So 20% off of any of his Mitozen products. Other than that, I think maybe the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop that I did Friday night is maybe one of the highest energy workshops I've ever done, like in the last, my first Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop was probably almost 45 years ago now. But Friday night was probably one of the highest energy workshops I've ever done. The receptivity of the audience, there were mostly new folks. There were a few old-timers. When I say old-timers, I mean going back 10, 11, 12 years and going back 40 years. So hats off or shout out to Daniel and JJ. They were part of the original Heartland project way back in the beginning, and they were here, and so it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
And they were the originators of the Dragon Klingon game.
They did the Dragon Klingon game. Yes, exactly. Yeah, actually, JJ was working with kids, and she designed that Dragon Klingon game for working the forgiveness process with kids. And then Jeannie chose to do the app. She decided to put the Dragon Klingon game in, got their support and their permission, and so we've got that game. It was kind of a turnaround. They took the forgiveness worksheet process, turned it into something for the little kids to use, and actually I've heard from people who do the Dragon Klingon game as adults and enjoy it. It's kind of a fun little thing, whereas people answer questions, and of course it's mainly designed for kids. The higher the score is, the louder the dragon roars, and all of that sort of thing. So pretty cool. Neat way to introduce the concept of forgiveness to kids. And other than that, it was just I'm not even sure what word to put to it. For me, it was left me in a state of a deepened serenity. At the same time, an excitement about presenting the information and getting the live feedback, that energetic feedback, especially from folks who are totally new, who are just kind of mind-boggled at it. I feel like the information's come together in still a clearer way than it ever has before. And actually, I was looking for a quote to use in the workshop, and I was having trouble finding it, so I contacted the genius on computers, and Ms. Jeannie found the quote that I was looking for, and it came from Max Planck, and it's sort of, can I say, I had used part of the quote previously, but never the full quote as Max Planck had spoken it back close to the turn of the century. This is a man who, if you're not familiar with the Planck Institute, he won the Nobel Prize in Physics literally for coming up with the root understanding of quantum physics, which, if you read the article that I wrote on healing war and what's going on in the Middle East right now, I put forward what, for me, is one of the first indicators of quantum mechanics and how this quantum field theory works. And that quote goes like this. It comes from a man named Job, who goes through all kinds of trauma and all kinds of loss. And, he's one of the most upright men in the world, but he blows it all. And he has the insight as to what the problem is, what happened, ties right into quantum mechanics. And what he said is, that which I feared most has come upon me. That which I dreaded has happened to me. Now, it's interesting if you read that whole book of Job that after the calamity occurs, like very shortly afterward, he has that insight. He gets that piece of information, but in the not understanding the healing process, not understanding what it really meant, confusion in his mind, and the confusion of the people. I mean, he has this procession of people who come to support him, and they go through all kinds of mumbo jumbo, blaming, gaming, craziness. And Job, after all of that, seems to come back to his early insight. Oh, that which I feared most has come upon me. That which I dreaded has happened. And then just before the turnaround comes, just before the healing, what does he say? I take back my words. What we speak into the quantum field. So anyway, all of that just ties together. And so here's Max Planck, Nobel Prize winner, the foundation of the deepest science of the universe yet known to man. And here's what he says: in all my research, I have never come across matter. To me, the term matter implies a bundle of energy which is given form by an intelligent spirit. As a man who's devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about atoms this much: there is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particles of an atom to vibration and holds this minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. And of course, that just ties together the whole why workshop. If you've done that with me over the years several times, I usually quote, because it's one I kind of already have in memory, of Einstein, where he says, on such things as matter, we've been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy whose vibrations have been so low as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. Matter doesn't exist. You go to the opening words in John, go back, to our work with the Gabour's manuscript and the Enlightenment book. What do the opening words in the book of John say? They know this 2,000 years ago? Yes, obviously they did, because it doesn't say, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. It says, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. Again, back to Planck. The term matter implies a bundle of energy which is given form by an intelligent spirit. This mind is the matrix of all matter. Mind, thought. Thought is the coalescing, organizing force behind everything that we experience. And what is forgiveness about? Forgiveness is about collapsing the product of the resonance of old energetic dynamics in the mind, which is called perception, collapsing those things, exposing the thoughts based in trauma and the absence of love to the active presence of love, and dissolving the trauma behind it. Of course, one can't dissolve the trauma behind it if they can't own that what they're doing to themselves. Virtually everybody, you've heard me say it 100 times, by nature of the fact of the way the world now is so insanely programming children, by the age of 4, the average person is a very devoutly religious member of the one world universal religion of blame. And the tricky stories and permutations in thought that people will go through to make sure that, somebody else knows they're the problem in my life. And so as long as we're a member of the one world religion, see, look what you did to me now. And the machinations a mind can go through to imagine that somebody did something to them. If their root power person dynamic is that of being blamed, then they're going to find a way to blame somebody else. And, the stories we can make up and the stories we can tell until we get to the bottom line of recognizing I'm the source of the mind energy that organizes. Listen to that word, organizes. You can unpack that into Max Planck's words, a bundle of energy given form, turned into organic structure. So anyway, thank you, sweetie, for finding that quote, because it is so profoundly powerful. And then we can add the quote, which I haven't spoken of on the show for quite some time, from David Bohm. You will remember as you've done worksheets, you run across the term sustained incoherence. David Bohm, a physicist who was a cohort of Einstein's, coined that term. And here's how he explains sustained incoherence. Thought doesn't know it is doing something, i.e., has organized energy into a form that attacks that oneself. So thought doesn't know that it's doing something, then it struggles against what it's doing. It doesn't want to know that it's doing it. You look at when you ask people to actually take responsibility for the crap they do in their lives and the way they puke on other people. And sometimes, people puke very nicely, but it's still puke. And this is, David Bohm, and golly, I don't even know when he said this, more than a half a century ago. It doesn't know it want to know that it's doing it. And thought struggles against the results, trying to avoid those unpleasant results, while keeping on with that way of thinking. That's what I call sustained incoherence, he says. Well, actually, that's what I call codependence. Remember our definition of a codependent. It's actually exactly the same as our definition of denial. When I think or speak as though somebody outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me, then I blame them for the energy that I'm coalescing in my field with my thought disorders, with my own sustained incoherence. The only way my integrated energy system can experience any form of pain or trauma is if I introduce an incoherent energy into the system. An incoherent energy is an energy that is of a different structure than my structured energy system. And what forgiveness does is it removes those thought disorders. And oftentimes those thought disorders have been going on generation upon generation upon generation. The workshop we did yesterday afternoon was codependence to interdependence, and we really dug into this codependent dynamic and how tricky and how subtle one can be at denying that the perception they're experiencing belongs to them, and finding ways to convince other people that it's their fault that there's an incoherent energy within them. Thought doesn't want to know what it's doing, struggles against it. And so basically the whole bottom line, if you go back through 5,000 hours or more than 5,000 now, the last 14 years of radio shows, you'll notice that basically every time a question comes up, why is Bill such a problem in my life? Why does Bill hate me so much? What's the whole bottom line of it? Is to utilize language, words, to assist one to recognize that their thought disorder is a thought disorder and it can be forgiven. And when it's forgiven, the active presence of love, the human life that we are, comes to the forefront instead of the highly charged pain, generational, emotional thought disorders. Being comes to the forefront. And something that became clear for me this weekend teaching became clear on another level was, yes, most everybody has experienced traumas and traumas, some far, far more intense and serious than others. Tragedies. And what the mind does, as David Bohm pointed out here, is it tries to avoid knowing that it's doing this to itself. And when I have the technology, this genius piece of technology created 2,000 years ago and finally decoded and understood from the Aramaic language, that collapses the product of the thought disorder so that one can go to the root of the thought disorder, to the root of the trauma that's been coalesced in one's life. And when I can bring that thing forward, which I perhaps have invested almost my whole life in avoiding, and I bring it forward in the presence of active love, dissolution occurs and it becomes meaningless. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't still apply, a trauma happened, that we don't have compassion, don't still apply, wow, that was a tragedy. But the sting of the tragedy dissolved in the presence of love. And when I'm talking about love, I'm talking about entering into the actual practice of living your human life as a human life, as love. I'm not talking about the culture's definitions of love, sexual athletics, or putting your head on the chopping block so that somebody else can beat you up and you can prove that you're sacrificing for them. It's got nothing to do with it. But when you bring your human life, when you bring active present love forward, then the string experiences based in sustained incoherence begin to dissolve. And it's just the power of it, the simplicity of it, for me, I'm talking, the way my mind is experiencing it and understanding it now after teaching this weekend, it just took on a whole new level of simplicity, a whole new level of clarity, and a whole new level of power. And if you're at the workshop this weekend and you're with us, I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear how it's impacted you, see if there are any questions to be asked or what have you. So, Miss Jeannie, do we have anybody out there in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
In Podbean, Jamuna says, it's almost like Yeshua was an advanced quantum machine in form and downloaded it perfectly.
That's it exactly. He had a perfect, if he were living today, he would be probably the Nobel Prize laureate of the century. And, this is another piece, as you say that, Jamuna, another piece that became clear to me this weekend was the world has tricked us into having us think that Yeshua was some kind of a religious figure and that he did mystical, magic, miraculous, unfathomable things that are out of harmony with the order of things because only he could do it and nobody else could. And we've been tricked into that so that we separate ourselves from, on another level, we separate ourselves from who we are. We are him. We are. He says, the things I do, you too can do. And there's no reservation on that. And it wasn't, it's miraculous in the fact that what he was able to do, he did, and that he understood the principles, but he taught the principles and handed them to anybody who's willing to use them to produce exactly the same results. So taking it out of this kind of mystical thing that makes it somewhat distant, not that it isn't mystical, but makes it distant from us and makes it something that happened 2,000 years ago, and we just have to kind of stand back and watch it and worship it, and then everything will be okay in our lives? No. John Lawrence and I actually were talking about maybe starting to do some Instagram conversations, because when we get together, we always have bounce back. He has a different perspective, as he's also a naturopath and a chiropractor, but we have different perspectives. And so we've had some pretty intense conversations about this whole structure of matter, structure of the world, how mind fits in, how forgiveness fits in, how breath fits in. And we've been talking about maybe doing some Instagram conversations to publish it, to put it out there, just to look at this. But again, what became clear for me is today, Yesh would be considered a preeminent physicist, a preeminent psychologist, psychiatrist, he would be considered a preeminent theologian as well, a preeminent geneticist. That's what he would be. That's what he was doing. He wasn't doing something out of the realm of the ordinary, which the Greeks took it and made it, out of the realm of the ordinary. And this is another piece that became clear for me this weekend. You'll remember a couple of weeks ago we were talking, we were looking in the Enlightenment book, and we're talking about this idea from the Aramaic of a demon. And one of the primo demons to be cast out is fear. And what is a demon? Unfortunately, the Greeks that just distorted virtually everything that he said and made of it what it is not, have this pantheon not only of gods but of demons. These horrible, terrifying, horrific creatures that are out there to get us. And of course, those critters are all part of the theology of the one world universal religion of blame. Something out there is the problem in my life. But in Aramaic, that word that's been translated as demon, that whole idea of demon is that it is a coalescence of thought energy, thought disorders, that is powerful enough to produce pictures in the mind of horrific things. And ultimately, I'm sort of just toying with recognizing that perception itself, everything that shows up, this is kind of something that came out of the weekend for me of the teaching, especially with the work we did around this idea of a demon, is that everything that shows up in perception could be labeled in the Aramaic context a demon. They are structures in the mind which distract us from the truth, which are based in thought disorders, and they coalesce as images that we pretend are outside of us. We blame somebody else for. When today, we hear people talking about, they were throwing out demons, they think of these horrific little creatures, like, when we got this slimy creature off of somebody and threw it away. There are no slimy creatures. It's not about slimy creatures. That's all the blame game. That's all the theology of the one world universal religion of blame. Demons are structures in human minds that are based in hostility or fear. Pardon me, they're the root of the demon, and the result, the projection from those thought disorders, are the real meaning of demon in the original sense. It's not about critters and creatures that are out to get us. And Satan, quote unquote, and this is, in how often have we heard this? Satan himself, like there's a him involved in Satan. Like there's actually a dude with a red suit, a tail, and a pitchfork. And millions of people have believed that. And millions of people have had their lives destroyed, not because of Satan, but because of the belief. Because in Aramaic, Satan means the resistor, one who misleads. Satan means being trapped in the constructs of perception. Remember, Yeshua comes out of the Garden of Gethsemane, and there's the hero Peter. He's going to protect Yeshua. The high priest servant shows up, and Peter takes his sword and goes after the high priest servant's head. Fortunately, we're told he just got an ear. Yeshua shows up, and he knows exactly what this man is going to do to him, and yet Yeshua, being clean and clear in his carbon-based memory of all terror and trauma and death, having done the work in the Garden of Gethsemane, that sweating blood is a healing crisis. And he came out clean of that. And he does what a human being would do. The archenemy, he reaches forward and heals him. And right about that time, he addressed Peter, who's considered to be the head of the whole organization once he left. He called Peter Satan. Directly addressed Peter and named him Satan. And then he defined what he meant by that. For you think in the mind of man rather than the plan of God. You're stuck in carbon-based memory, perception, everything from the past. And therefore, the actuality of what the Creator has going on is not available to someone who's trapped in that demon perception. And again, the genius of Yeshua, knowing precisely how to collapse those perceptual constructs. Understand, it's mind-boggling to me today when I look at that he understood that perception is driven by goals, that goals are the recruiters of data from carbon-based memory, and the fact that something is in carbon-based memory obviously means that it's from the past. So goals gather data from the past, and it's a wonderful, it's actually, perception is meant to be our footstool. It's meant to be there to help us. We need information from the past, we have information from the past. But it's lost its purpose. And it isn't the footstool, it isn't just, I need a piece of information from the past. People have been tricked into thinking that constructs from the past are actually what's going on in the present moment. So, this what's designed to be a footstool is taken over the game for most people and is running their lives. And my offering is that much of what has been offered when you go to the fear-based theologies of the world is a fantasy made up of demons, thought disorders that show up as theology, as theological ideas, as condemnation, as judgment. You remember how those who were stuck in that demon of judgment wanted Yeshua to judge this woman who's been caught in prostitution. And Yeshua refuses. And he blows them all off. They all disappear because he calls them on their projections. And as he calls them on their projections, they leave, but they come back with a story. And you'll notice the theological story now is, quote unquote, theological. In the end time, he will come to judge the living and the dead. The job he refused to do when he was here will assign to him for some afterlife or some later time. And that's insane. The man said, no, I am not here to judge you. I'm here to bring the active presence of love and healing. And they didn't have the eyes to see, and they didn't have the ears to hear. So that's a little bit about what I'm processing today after having done, well, let's see, what did we do? 4, 7, and almost 20 hours over the weekend. It was pretty sweet, pretty awesome.
You have
so
two
that's what's
questions?
happening here in Sarasota, Florida. Go for it, sweetie.
Okay, the first one question. I totally agree with you that the devil being our thought disorders, etc. But are there demons and dark entities existing?
Absolutely not.
So the demons that Yeshua fought in the wilderness was actually collapsing thought disorders for all of us, essentially. It wasn't actually demons out there.
He was doing his work. Again, you got to know, he says in order to understand anything that he's doing or saying, you've got to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. What do most of us have for demon now? We have Greek eyes and ears. Oh, these creatures out there. That's not the Aramaic meaning of demon. That isn't what it was talking about. He's in there doing his own work, dealing with his own genetic history and cleaning up his own mind. And, as a naturopath, and you've heard me talk about the whole concept of a healing crisis, and that when an energy comes into this energy system, Max Planck was saying, an energy bundle is coalesced by thought. So when we engage in a thought disorder, we coalesce, literally we coalesce electrons, protons, neutrons, etc., into what's called matter. What's the matter with me? This is matter. And on the way in, when we engage in something like that, the energetic patterns that we're engaged in create symptoms. Physical, mental, emotional symptoms. That's why one of the important steps in the worksheet process is I'm willing to go through the physical, mental, and emotional symptoms of healing. So when we see him in the desert wrestling with his own thought disorders, when we see him in Gethsemane sweating blood, that, for me as a naturopathic physician, watching that happen, what he's doing is he is detoxing on a level that's virtually unheard of. The real work of what people call redemption was done in the garden. He cleaned it up and became the space where anyone who's willing to be supported, remember he said, I'm here for you forever. And what that means is, I will be the space of love available to assist you in transmuting whatever you need to deal with. And then he says, and here, just in case you don't understand, here's my demonstration. Watch, they're going to mercilessly slaughter me. But because I'm not lost in the mind, remember he said, I be in this world, but not, I am in this world, but not of it. In other words, it doesn't run my creative process. I run it in relationship with the active present love that I am an expression of. And so he informs Peter that he's functioning as Satan trying to block the whole plan that he has set up. And he defines precisely what that means. He says, for you are in the mind of man. You are in carbon-based memory, adamos, which is reflections of the past, rather than in the actuality of the Creator. And when we coalesce enough thought disorders in our minds, they'll show up as diseases in our bodies. And if somebody comes along and has the clarity and can support us in dissolving the thought disorders that create this projection of a demon, some kind of entity that's to blame for what's going on in my life, then literally as those energetic patterns are dissolved by the presence of love, the corresponding physical diseases, the corresponding mental, emotional diseases disappear. And he said, you can do that as well as I can. And then he made up a theology about, well, he's the only one that could really do it. He didn't really mean you could do it. Yeah, well, that stuff, that was 2,000 years ago. That doesn't happen today. Yeah, it happens today, and you're designed to be able to do it. But they make up this story that makes it somehow distant and mystical or untouchable. You can call forward grace at any time, at any instant that you choose to in your life. And grace is something else that they made into something mystical. Oh, grace. It's really just simple, straightforward. Grace is the ability to change your mind anytime you want. If you've coalesced into a demon, there's this quote-unquote physical disease. You brought the energy into your physical with such thought disorders that you've got this physical disease. Anytime you choose to face that and to forgive us to that set of thought disorders and the coalescing energy and pain behind it, anytime you choose to bring that forward in the presence of love, you can free yourself of that disease. You can free yourself of that demon. And that is, you can undo the complex thought disorders that produce these terrors and traumas in your mind and in your body. So to me, it just takes on another whole level of actuality and connectedness with us and what we're really capable of as human beings.
And there's another question.
Great.
She says, I was called a bully. I think this is a family trauma. I can be a bully, especially when I really want something. Please give me guidance on the worksheet.
Yes. So you just said it. You just gave the whole scenario. Especially when I want something, especially when I have a goal that I want to achieve. Now notice, and I'll just ask you to take a look, take a breath. How did it feel when your power person bullied you in order to get what they wanted you to do to get that done? How did it feel when they did that? Then guess what? When you do that to somebody else, it feels the same to them or somewhat similar. They'll have different thought disorders connected to it, but so what to do with worksheets? I would suggest you make a list of every circumstance that ever happened in your life where somebody accused you of coming across as a bully. Down the name of whoever that person was. Then look at the goal you held. What was it you wanted in that situation that had you call on the power person energy? Remember when people are ultra stressed, and it's goals that create stress. When people are ultra stressed, if they've not resolved their power person dynamics, they'll do whatever their power person did to them that they hated the most. And that's when that bully energy comes out. And it will come out, you know, the intensity with which it was blasted at you as a kid, and when your field was open and you just drew that energy in, you will re-radiate the energy at the same level of intensity as your power person pointed it at you. And the way you'll resolve it is go back through, again, every time you've ever been called a bully, look at, and I acknowledge you for being able to own that you are a bully, that when you want something, you go for it, and you use the energy absorbed from your power person that you hated person to get from you what they wanted. And the power person in a child's mind, being a god, it's like, well, how do I get to win? Oh, I just do what they do. So I take that same bully energy and I turn it on somebody else to try to force them into giving me what I want. I resolve that by canceling the goals. So in each situation where you've been labeled that, I invite you to look at the goal or goals you've had around that person or those persons and start canceling those goals. And as you cancel those goals, you will collapse the perceptual constructs related to those issues. And as you do, there'll come a point when you become courageous enough and when you become vital enough that you'll drop into the original bully energy. There's another component to this too, and that is that when the power person unleashes their, in this case, bully energy on the child is forced, at least in their minds, to give up their connectedness to love in order to harmonize with and fulfill what the power person wanted. And the disconnection from the presence of love is the moment of original rage. And that original rage needs to be embraced and forgiven in order to be free of using it on others when the stress is up and the chips are down. So I hope that makes sense. So I go through that whole list. And, you know, if you've got some people, maybe it happened a dozen times, maybe 2 dozen times. Gee, they've always been accusing me. Go back through every time and look at the goals you had that involved them and start canceling those goals. Start doing worksheets around those goals. That one's going to change your life. I acknowledge you for owning it the way you owned it and recognizing it. And if you do that work, you're going to change your life. And what you're going to find is, remember the principle in the worksheet that says when I get the original, they get the carbon copy. So when I recognize that, when I bully, when I use that power person, I've already got that energy in me, and now it's re-amplified. I serve it up to somebody else, so I strengthen it in me at a whole other level. What you'll find is as you dissolve that and go back to that connected space, that your physiology, your emotions in your mind are going to live in a state of serenity rather than the state of turmoil, of unresolved turmoil. So that's going to be powerful work for you. Congratulations.
And we have one more question, and then we do have 2 hands
Great.
up. If we don't get to you today, please call in tomorrow. So the next one is, so do you 2 ever get upset anymore? Is that where
Absolutely.
this process gets you? Do you still do the worksheets every time you're upset by something? I suppose I'm asking because I'm using this stuff and was in really good place, and then I moved countries because I met and fell in love, and she is now my wife. She is amazing. And I began to have a series of failed jobs, failed friendships. People stopped talking to me in AA. I ran up some credit card debt again, which I don't want to do, but it's a recurring pattern. And I thought, what's going on? Why again? Looking back at myself, I realized I had a part in every single incident. Excuse me. But it's taken 9 to 10 years to take the blinders off and start this work again. How do you stay in it consistently? every day, every person, every situation, every payment. I think Michael's been doing this since 1996. That's the year I got sober, and I am nowhere near his level. What am I doing wrong?
You're not doing anything wrong, and actually I've been doing it since the 70s, and I'm not finished. I still do my work. In fact, I shared on the show a couple of weeks ago, I shared it yesterday in the workshop, that I got what, for me at this point, feels like the final piece of work on my internal process in relationship to my power person, to my father, that I did, and I was sharing with the group yesterday that the first piece of work that I remember as I started down this road, this path, when I was in utero, my mother had toxemia the last 6 days I was in utero, and they gave her Pitocin to try to force me out. The night of my birth, they called my father and said, if you want to see this kid alive, you better get down here. He's not going to live through the night. And 3 or 4 times the first year of my life, I was almost dead. The early years of my life, I was never in school the first couple of weeks of school. That was hay fever and allergy season, and I was in an oxygen tent with asthma instead of being in school. And the first piece of work I remember doing, and this goes back to, let me think, 52 years ago, first piece of work I did. I had allergies up the wazoo. I couldn't be near anybody cutting grass. I was in the restaurant business at the time. And I did a piece of work where I had the memory surface of being around 2 or 3 years of age, and my father belittling me and forcing me into a corner and choking up. That was the first piece of work I did. That's 52 years ago. About 2 weeks ago, and you've heard me talk about how deeply both Jeannie and I cherish our granddaughter, Aria Rain. I did what I consider to be, at least at this point I think it is, the final piece of work around my own father. And in a still point, I'm doing still point breathing, and in a still point, I was able to, for the first time, totally and completely embrace him as tenderly and as lovingly, with the same kind of present love that I do with Aria Rain. And it feels like I'm complete with that now. So you're not doing anything wrong. When you realize that what you're cleaning up is a multi-generational database, that if you just go back 30 generations, you're talking about 1.6 billion lives. Now, on a planet where in the last 6,000 years, in war we have murdered over 2 billion people, how much trauma do you suppose went on in the 1.6 billion lives before you arrived on the planet? What's in, this is not the question about a credit card, what's in your wallet, what's in your genes. And when you have the courage to say, I'm going to take it on, it's not a beeline. It's not, okay, there's the goal over there, now I've got a straight line, I'm going to go right to it. There are a lot of detours. There are a lot of emotionally traumatic energies that when they surface, disrupt and shatter everything. And that's the ceiling shattered for going to the next level of the work. And the next level of the work, and the next level of the work. And processing through those old dynamics is oftentimes messy. Physically, mentally, emotionally, relationally, what shows up in your life, those dynamics can be pretty messy. So know that we're here to hold the space for you, and you are on track. That's what the healing process looks like. It's not I walk from point A to B from point A to point B, and now I'm finished. I walk from point A to C to D to Z to Y to X to B, back at A. That's the process. When you realize what you're doing, what you're cleaning up, yes, things surface. As you listen to that story about Yeshua wrestling demons, you look at Yeshua. Now, here's Yeshua. I mean, he's been out there teaching it full blast. And he goes into the Garden of Gethsemane and he sweats blood. His healing crisis is so deep that empowered him to say, now I'm ready to literally assist by taking on all of the dark energy of the world and assisting in processing through it. Not as a suffering victim, but as a conscious, active being of love who knew exactly what he was doing and chose to be support for the world. Something the world needs deeply today. And if we need to continue this conversation tomorrow, let's do it. The show has told us it's complete. So I'm going to say thank you for joining us, holding the space, and look forward to talking with you tomorrow. Bye.